SNAP. Food stamps. A couple of changes there. We'll hit the highlights. You may have heard about this already. The food box program, one of the most innovative things. Actually, I think it originated at the USDA. Secretary Perdue wanted to give it a chance. We thought it was a tremendous idea. So what we do is propose that for folks who are on food stamps, part, not all, part of their benefits come in the actual sort of, and I don't want to steal somebody's copyright, but a blue apron type program where you actually receive the food instead of receive the cash. It lowers the cost to us because we can buy prices at wholesale whereas they have to buy it at retail. It also makes sure that they're getting nutritious food, so we're pretty excited about that.
The president made a speech in the Midwest about how you might be working 3 jobs, but the person next to you is working no jobs and on government assistance and earning more than you are, which, we have not been able to find that example. But the attack on the welfare state has begun.
Yeah, conservatives who knew that the tax reform package was going to be deficit funded, wanted some sort of deep cuts afterwards. The spending bill last week has made them furious. They talk about trying to sort of fire up their base with this welfare reform, which is, food stamps. They're not going to cut Medicare, and they're not going to cut Social Security. They're not going to do it. The president campaigned against it. He has a fiscal hawk, a former Freedom Caucus member, in Mick Mulvaney, his budget director, who is trying to balance the books, and obviously, when he does the math, always includes entitlement reform. But we know from covering, president's budgets in the past, doesn't matter who the president is. The minute the budget is introduced, the members of Congress in the majority say, we have the power of the purse, thank you very much, we'll write our own budget, and they move on from there. So it's not really an indication of what is going to happen. I think welfare reform is a good talking point that they believe that they need to tell their base, but I don't see any of that happening either.
And that's especially true this year, especially with the 2-year spending bill that they just passed. Right. All budgets are but a wish list. This is even more fanciful than most. Right. So it's really cheap. It's really cheap for the president to put this in the budget and say, see, Tea Party, but then nothing actually gets enacted. Last point, we really do need to reform these entitlements if we want to be solvent in the future.
Well, let's talk about one of them, SNAP. This is the food stamp program, which aren't food stamps anymore. They're a card. They're cutting $213 billion out of the funding for SNAP. But this is interesting because the program now, they want to provide nutritious packages instead of vouchers, comparing them to a meal prep company like Blue Apron or something like that. What do you think?
Well, it's just going to have to, we're going to have to see what is going to fly with Republicans on Capitol Hill. They're not doing any bills with Democrats. They're not taking into view the minority voices on these decisions, and so they're doing a majority of the majority. And it's really going to be a question of what priorities conservatives have. Conservatives are now in the driver's seat. They're not going to let the president and the leadership do infrastructure because they've spent too much money, and it's all going to be about what their priorities are. There's a bit of an optics problem, right, with cutting into SNAP and Medicare or Medicaid. Not to the Freedom Caucus.
While we are cutting corporate taxes and the taxes on the wealthiest Americans.
But policing what poor people eat or are able to eat has long been a tradition of that end of the Republican Party.
What do you make of the infrastructure proposal that's out there? There are a lot of people who say it's just dead on arrival for Republicans. Ironically, this has traditionally been something Republicans have liked, the idea that there are big infrastructure projects that help some of their supporters and give us a stronger infrastructure for a better economy.
Republicans in leadership right now and the Trump administration are hostage to this DACA debate. They can't move on until they deal with that. They're paralyzed by it. Conservatives, and I keep mentioning the Freedom Caucus, who voted against the spending bill last week, who are mad about, even though they supported the tax bill going into deficit, are saying, you better hold a hard line on immigration. We're not spending more on infrastructure. We're in the hole here. We've lost our way, our fiscal rectitude. So that is really going to be the main driving influence in what they do in the rest of a midterm election year. Infrastructure, the White House proposal doesn't have a funding path. There's only $200 billion federal. The rest is from private.
And even that $200 billion is not got paid for at the moment.
Exactly. And so it's really hard to see, even though there's bipartisan support for infrastructure, this happening as a leadership priority this year.
And as you know, Ali, every economist will tell you during flush economic times is not the time to stimulate the economy.
Right.
So he has this sclerotic view of the world or politics. He promised infrastructure. We're going to do infrastructure. But when you take into account the tax cuts, when you take into account the budget that passed, and to give credit, the economy is going well.
Right.
This is not the time for it, especially the way it's funded or not funded. At least we're calling it a $200 million, not a
1.5 trillion or whatever it is.
That is accurate.
Mike, good to see you. As always, thank you. AB, thank you very much for being with us. We're